To kick things off, I need to mention that I'm sharing this from a hospital room. Just yesterday morning, around 7:30 a.m., my wife and I found ourselves in a car accident. I walked away with only a few scrapes and bruises, but Sarah, my wife, sustained some serious injuries. A crushed shoulder, a broken collarbone, 3 fractured ribs, and a collapsed lung. The doctors say she'll recover completely, but for now, they've got her heavily sedated. If everything had been perfect in our marriage, I wouldn't be sharing this with you, that much is clear. I never imagined that Sarah could betray me in any way. My heart feels shattered, and I'm left feeling incomplete, like a vital part of me has been ripped away. The worst part is that the missing piece is just 3 feet away from me, lying in that hospital bed. Over the past 3 months, I sensed we were drifting apart, but I couldn't pinpoint why. At 34, Sarah and I have known each other since childhood. We started dating in high school and stayed together throughout college. She's the only woman I've ever been with physically, and until recently, she could say the same about me. We tied the knot a year after graduating and welcomed our first child, David, just a year later. 3 years after David arrived, our daughter, Olivia, entered the picture. I cherish my kids more than anything in the world. If it weren't for them, I honestly don't know if I'd be holding it together right now. Thankfully, they weren't in the car during the accident. They were at my parents' place for the night. We were supposed to fly to Florida for a cruise yesterday afternoon, but obviously those plans are now out the window. Sarah decided to go out with her best friend, Rebecca, despite my pleas for her to come home and stay off the roads in the snow. She insisted they were only going to grab a few drinks since they wouldn't see each other for a week. I went to bed and slept soundly until around 5 a.m. When I finally got up and peeked outside, I noticed Sarah's car was still missing, and the snow had piled up even more. I figured Sarah and Rebecca had likely gotten a bit too tipsy and stayed over at her place. I quickly threw on some clothes and jumped into my SUV. Before hitting the road, I shot Sarah a text, warning her against driving because the snow was getting too deep and that I was on my way to pick her up. That message went unread. Countless times, I found myself wondering what might have happened if she had actually seen that text. I'd still be stuck in a lie, clinging to a gut feeling that something was off, but I wouldn't be drowning in the unbearable misery I feel right now. When I pulled up in front of Rebecca's condo, I glanced at my phone again. Still no sign that my message had been read. I held on to hope that Sarah would see it and be ready by the time I arrived. But deep down, I braced myself for the reality that I'd need to go in and wake her up. The front door was wide open, so I stepped inside and glanced toward the TV room on my right. No one was passed out on the couch. Knowing Rebecca's bedroom was downstairs and not wanting to disturb her, I decided to head upstairs to the guest room and open the door. That's when my life changed forever. Walking into that room, I saw 2 heads peeking out from under the covers. I remember leaning down to pull the comforter away, and in that moment, I spotted my wife, Sarah, resting her head on some guy's bare chest. The next thing I knew, I was wrestling with Rebecca, Sarah, and this shirtless stranger as they tried to pull me off him. Honestly, I'd probably be in jail right now if they hadn't intervened, but I don't really recall much about it. So whether it was right or wrong, I don't feel particularly guilty about my reaction. As for my wife, well, her mood seems to shift by the minute these days. When I finally regained my composure, the guy mentioned he'd take his buddy to the hospital. Meanwhile, Sarah was sobbing uncontrollably while Rebecca and I screamed at one another. I told them both that I was leaving and that Sarah had 5 minutes to get in the car or she could forget about coming home. She managed to be ready in just 3. Driving in the snow while angry was a terrible idea, even with 4-wheel drive. But it was another vehicle that swerved into our lane, sending us crashing through a guardrail. That's what caused Sarah's injuries. The car flipped over, but thank God for airbags. We survived. The kids don't even know about the accident. I haven't contacted anyone, and I probably should have, but this isn't just a car wreck. My entire life feels wrecked, and I'm trying to assess the damage before dragging anyone else into this mess. I'm numb, yet it hurts like hell, and it's not from the accident. I feel like I don't even recognize the person lying in that hospital bed anymore. There are so many questions I want to ask her, but deep down, I'm terrified of the answers. It's clear she no longer loves me. No one with any decency could betray someone they claim to love. So, I find myself questioning whether she ever truly loved me in the first place. And now that she's crossed that line, would I even want her to love me again if there was any chance of that happening? I'm not sure exactly when Sarah first strayed, but in my eyes, the moment she did, our marriage came to an end. She broke our vows, and by doing so, she ended our union. I don't need a divorce lawyer to dissolve our marriage. She's already taken care of that. As far as I'm concerned, I'm no longer bound by the promises I made. A massive part of me wants to just walk out of this room right now. I want to call her parents, tell them everything she's done, and let them know she's their problem once again. After all these years together, we promised to stick it out for better or for worse, and I genuinely meant that. But now we're no longer married. A part of me even thinks about leaving her a note that says, "Too bad the worst happened after you decided to end our relationship. The only thing keeping me anchored in this awful room is my kids. I long to see them, but I've got some scratches on my face and neck that would give away something's wrong if they noticed. As much as I feel my wife has tarnished our family, my children still need her. I thought I had a lifelong partner, and despite how terrible she's turned out to be, my kids deserve a mother in their lives. There are conversations I'm not equipped to handle, and I wouldn't even know where to start. There will be injuries that require comforting kisses instead of being told to toughen up. I pride myself on being a great father, but I can't play the role of a mother, too. Please, I need help. How can I sit here and look at someone who has stabbed me in the back so brutally? Should I call her parents to come? What on earth do I tell them? I really don't want to face them, especially since they'll see I'm seething. If I don't disclose what she did, they're bound to sense my anger. And what in the world do I say to my kids? Sure, I can tell them we had an accident, but I'm not one to fake emotions. Obviously, my wife seems to have that skill down, but when I'm filled with rage, it shows on my face. They'll know I'm upset with their mother. How did my life spiral into this mess? I already know I need to consult a lawyer, that much is clear. But how do I even begin to deal with all of this? That day, I decided to stay one more night in that hospital room with Sarah sedated and the lights dimmed. I reclined in the chair, staring up at the ceiling while listening to the beeping of the medical machines. I lay there, grappling with how my life had plummeted to this point. Part of me felt I was giving her undeserved mercy just by being in the same room, yet I still felt a flicker of love for her. I didn't want to feel that love. I felt weak for holding on to any positive feelings toward her. Over and over, it struck me that there was no way to revert things back to how they used to be. It was like a natural disaster had swept through, destroying the life we built together. I cried, so hard that it felt like my heart was breaking. I understood that a significant chapter of my life had come to an end. That realization was monumental. The next morning, when the nurse came in to draw blood, I took that as my cue to step out. As I was leaving, Sarah woke up and called out to me, but I pretended not to hear her. I headed down to grab some breakfast. Ever since finding out the truth, my appetite has been nearly non-existent. I tried to pass the time by eating and scrolling through my phone. There was a text from Rebecca asking where Sarah was, but I left it unread. By 7 a.m., the light was bright enough for me to knock on Sarah's parents' door. Her dad has always been an early riser, so I figured I'd talk to him first, and if he thought his wife needed to know, he could wake her. I noticed smoke rising from the wood stove in his workshop out back, so I knocked on the door before stepping in. When he saw the scratches on my neck and the bruise on my cheek, I explained that there had been an accident and that Sarah had suffered the worst of it, but we needed to have a serious talk. I think he assumed I was going to discuss the accident, so he called my mother-in-law to join us. We settled in the kitchen while I recounted how, rounding a curve, a car coming towards us veered into our lane. With our heavier vehicle and all-wheel drive, I managed to keep us on the road until we crashed into the guardrail. The passenger side door hit one of the concrete vertical beams, and even with the side airbags deployed, Sarah took a hard hit. I explained that she had a lot of injuries but assured them she was stable and expected to recover fully. They both shed tears, feeling relieved that their daughter would still be around for them to love. As soon as they suggested they would do anything to help care for Sarah, I cut them off, clarifying that the wreck wasn't why I was there. They looked bewildered as I explained how I had sent a text that morning, intending to check on Sarah in the snow. Then, I shared the horrifying experience of walking in on their daughter with a man I'd never seen before, and my instinctive reaction to physically confront him. They were taken aback, clearly shocked. I then informed them which room Sarah was in at the hospital and expressed my desire for them to remain involved in the kids' lives, hoping we could still keep a friendly relationship. I mentioned that my dad was looking after the kids for now, but I was in the process of divorcing their daughter since she had shattered our vows and was no longer my wife. I explained that I was leaving their place to head to my dad's and that I would be telling the kids about the wreck. I also planned to let them know that we were splitting up and that their mother was a cheater. I told my former in-laws that while it pained me to see things end this way, at least I could take comfort in the fact that I wasn't the one who wrecked our marriage and my life. They tried to convince me not to be so rash, arguing that Sarah had made a mistake and offering the usual lame excuses. I simply smiled and told them I had genuinely enjoyed having them as in-laws over the years, then walked out. When I arrived at my dad's house, I had so much on my mind that I needed to unload. I walked in through the kitchen and found him sipping his morning coffee. The only thing he knew was that I was supposed to be off enjoying a big boat in the Caribbean. He stood up, looking puzzled, and asked what I was doing there. I just wrapped my arms around him and broke down, crying like a child. He could sense I needed to vent, but also realized he had to let me cry it out before asking too many questions. He led me into the den and sat me down on the couch, saying he would go fetch my mom. We both encouraged her to grab a cup of coffee first, but she knew if I was there alone that early, it must have been something serious. I started by telling them about Sarah's infidelity, how I caught her in the act, and my subsequent departure from Rebecca's place. Then I explained the wreck and how bad it was, detailing Sarah's injuries and mentioning that I just informed her parents about it an hour earlier so they could visit her. Both of my parents were left in shock. My mom finally asked what my plans were moving forward. They cried as I explained that my only remaining option was to divorce Sarah and focus on being the best father I could for my kids. As our conversation started winding down, I heard my daughter, Olivia, squealing, "Daddy!" and racing down the stairs towards me. That woke my son, David, who was also down in no time. I hadn't seen them in ages, so I spent precious moments hugging them, grateful to be with them again. It took them a while to notice my scratches, and I explained about the wreck and reassured them that their mommy was in the hospital but would be okay. I mentioned that Sarah's parents would eventually pick them up to take them to see her, and that was all I felt I needed to share. I spent the day playing with, talking to, holding, napping alongside, and laughing with my kids. They reignited my will to live. Up until that moment, I was honestly about 50-50 on whether I wanted to carry on, but they made it clear that they were worth living for, protecting, and cherishing. Sarah's phone had been wrecked in the accident, so no one had received any responses for days. That evening, I started getting texts from my mother-in-law's phone, which I knew had to be coming from Sarah. I ignored them. The messages continued sporadically throughout the night, so I turned off notifications to avoid the distractions. The next day, I reached out to 3 law offices about filing for divorce. I can't say I want or even need a legal divorce, but it's necessary to divide our assets and sort out custody of our children. What she does with whom is no longer my concern. I met with 2 lawyers and I was quite impressed with the second one. I'll check in with the third-rated lawyer to see if they can win me over. If not, I'll go with the second firm's top divorce attorney. Regardless, I'll have eliminated 3 top legal options from her list, and that feels like a victory to me. Custody is my top priority. I'm not aiming for full custody, nor would I want it if I could. My kids need their mother in their lives, but because of her actions, she can never again be part of mine. A go-between can handle dropping the kids off whenever they need to be somewhere. There's no reason for me to ever speak to her again. I obviously never truly knew her, so why would I continue interacting with a stranger? I'll be back at work next week, which would have been our cruise week. I didn't share with anyone at work that we didn't go or anything about the wreck. Of course, people will see me driving a rental car and question whether I got a new vehicle. I'm not sure if I need to inform HR, but I'd rather keep my personal life private. I feel humiliated as it is without it becoming gossip. Divorce might sometimes be necessary, but it always signifies failure. Yet I'm done being the anchor for a ship that has already sunk. For those who insisted, rightly so, that I get tested for STDs, I went through a full screening. Thank God it came back clean on all counts. Even so, the experience made me feel like some kind of trench coat pervert, despite having done nothing wrong. By now, I assume Sarah has left the hospital. Her parents didn't even bother to bring her home. They wouldn't have been able to contact me anyway because of the constant texts from Sarah that I wasn't reading. As soon as I can file for divorce and have her served, I'll finally be free from the biggest mistake of my life. Her actions have invalidated all those years we spent together. If I had the chance to do it all over again, I wouldn't choose her. I'd pick a life with someone else, anyone who could be faithful and loyal. The greatest thing Sarah had is what she willingly threw away: the trust that comes with having someone to call your own. Now, she's left with nothing but loneliness. I know it was all a lie. I meant nothing to her. People often get swept away by a beautiful lie while recoiling from the ugly truth. I'm not one of those people. Unless someone is holding a gun to your head, there's no justification for cheating. Once you've made a life commitment that you swore to uphold, choosing to destroy it for the other person is downright vile. I wish to God I had never met her and had taken a chance on anyone else. She had no right to create a life for me and then take it all away without my consent. The man I was before her betrayal is gone for good. The woman she pretended to be never truly existed, and the life I had is now a crumbling facade that no one wants to inhabit. Not only am I uncertain about where to begin, but I also don't even know what to say when I finally do. The first thing I want to share is that I managed to find a really good lawyer. Her firm has the highest ratings for representing men in divorce cases in my area. Instead of handing my case off to someone else in the office, she took it on herself. Everyone at the firm has been kind and supportive. I can tell they genuinely care about more than just collecting their retainer and a paycheck. Sophia, my lawyer, has gone out of her way to help me with my well-being and sanity. Once she agreed to take on my case, we went through the usual forms I needed to fill out. I provided information about our property and all our bank accounts, along with rough estimates of our incomes. After explaining the wreck and what I saw just before it happened, she asked if I had undergone an STD panel. I told her I had and that everything came back clean. Then she inquired if I had documented the infidelity with any photos or videos. I had to admit that I hadn't been thinking clearly enough at the time to do that. She called a private investigator her firm frequently uses and set up a meeting for us the next day. Since I live in an at-fault state, I knew I needed solid evidence to support my divorce claim, even though I was already aware of Sarah's unfaithfulness. We arranged for one of her staff to act as a go-between for me and Sarah's dad regarding communication and to coordinate drop-offs. I had her aide notify my soon-to-be ex-father-in-law that my ex could have the kids that upcoming weekend and the following week. Sophia then asked if I had set up therapy for myself and the kids. I explained that I had my first therapy appointment scheduled for that week, but since the children hadn't been informed about anything yet, I was holding off on that. She told me to let her know as soon as I felt they needed professional help. She had several therapists she could recommend. She expressed what seemed to be sincere sympathy for everything I was going through and would continue to face. I generally dislike lawyers, but I think I might have found one with an actual soul. She provided me with a list of things to gather and tasks to complete before our next meeting. Many of her instructions were similar to what I'd seen online, so when she suggested I swing by the drugstore to pick up 2 DNA kits, I didn't think much of it. I understood it was standard protocol. That night, when I got home with the kids, I did the cheek swabs for all of us. I sealed everything up and mailed the kits off after dropping the kids at school the next morning. 2 days later, on Friday, the go-between dropped the kids off with their grandfather for the weekend. That morning, I headed to work. I had just returned from lunch when I received an email notification in my personal account. I noticed it contained 2 emails from the lab, so I decided to wait until I got to my desk to check them out. I opened the first email and clicked on the link. The results confirmed that my son, David, is indeed my biological child. I opened the second email and clicked the link, reading what it said. I read it again, trying to comprehend the words. I was at a loss for words and could only shake my head in disbelief. I knew I needed to leave the office before I broke down, but I managed to take screenshots of both results and emailed them to myself as photo files. Once I got to my car, I began to sob uncontrollably as the harsh reality sank in that my daughter, Olivia, was not actually mine. I can't imagine losing an arm would hurt more than losing a daughter. Felt like my very soul was being ripped away from me. There's no other way to put it. I didn't know who to call. I sat there crying, wishing more than anything that I could wake up from this nightmare. I downloaded the files from my email and texted the pictures to my lawyer. Within 20 seconds, Sophia called, asking where I was. Work was all I could manage to reply. She insisted I stay put, assuring me that someone from the firm would arrive shortly. I ended the call, opened the door, and suddenly found myself vomiting uncontrollably until I was dry heaving. By the time I got a handle on it and stopped feeling dizzy, one of the paralegals had shown up to take me to the firm. As soon as Sophia finished with a client, they ushered me into her office. The first thing she said was that sometimes test results can be inaccurate. She acknowledged that I had every right to be upset, but urged me to get both Olivia and me tested again at a local lab to ensure nothing got contaminated. I couldn't wrap my head around what was happening. Even after catching Sarah cheating, I assumed that the DNA test for the kids was just a formality. I never imagined my wife could have been unfaithful enough to have someone else's child. If that was true, who the hell did I even marry? I didn't have concrete proof yet, so confronting Sarah was out of the question. I couldn't fathom how we'd even have that discussion if the results confirmed our worst fears. One of the women at the firm checked my blood pressure with a cuff to make sure it wasn't dangerously high. It was elevated, and I felt like I was on the verge of a panic attack. Yet, I was numb and in shock all at once. I wondered what lay ahead. The thought that my little girl might have never actually been mine was too much to bear. At that moment, I was grateful the kids were with their mom. But then doubts crept in. What if both tests were wrong? What if David wasn't my son, either? I knew I couldn't wait 2 days for answers. So the go-between arranged to pick up Olivia the following day for a few hours to take her back to Sarah's parents. We did the test in a sterile environment, handled by trained medical professionals. There was no chance for mix-ups. I am not Olivia's father. It still took a day to get the results, and by the time I received them, she was back with her mom. When I read the news, I cried even harder the second time. I was relieved Olivia wasn't there to witness my breakdown. I sent the results to my lawyer, and she called to check on me. She encouraged me to reach out to family and not face this alone. I got into my car and drove to my dad's house, sobbing the entire way. When I arrived, my mom could see something was wrong but couldn't get me to open up. Finally, I managed to say, "Olivia is not my daughter." My mom asked, "What?" But deep down, she knew she heard me right, and I couldn't repeat it. After about 30 seconds of silence, aside from my weeping, she stood up and grabbed her cell phone. She called my dad, telling him to hurry home but to be careful because I had bad news. I could tell my dad wanted a hint about what could be so devastating. But my mom insisted he just drive safely and get home as soon as he could. He made it back in about 20 minutes, and we all just cried together for hours. I'd console my dad, he'd console my mom, and we were all inconsolable. They, of course, asked about David, and I reassured them that he was mine. They both felt relieved but then expressed guilt for feeling that way about only losing one grandchild. They asked me what my plans were, and I told them I had no idea. The only thing I was certain of was that Olivia would never lack for anything she needed or even most things she wanted. I didn't care about potential child support right then. I just wanted to ensure she would be taken care of. As awful as I felt for myself, I felt even worse for Olivia. She was completely innocent in all this. Did I want custody of her? Was that even possible? I started to wonder if Sarah knew or suspected anything. Suddenly, I was desperate for answers. I met with Sophia after work on Monday, and she informed me that she had spoken with the private investigator hired to follow Sarah. Because of the wreck, Sarah hadn't been able to go out and cheat anymore, so I wasn't surprised that the investigator didn't have any recent evidence. However, one of the things Sophia asked me to bring was Sarah's old cell phone, which I had dug out of a drawer at home. The investigator was able to access nearly every app on it as if he were using her destroyed phone. He found nude photos sent and received from various guys, a mountain of messages, and enough sexting admissions to sway any judge. When I was asked if I wanted to see any of the pictures or read the texts, I declined. Sophia and I needed to strategize how I would confront Sarah about Olivia. She thought it would be best to do it in her office if Sarah could be convinced to come. Sophia called Sarah's mom's cell while I was there. Hearing Sarah's voice for the first time since I left the hospital was surreal. Sophia got straight to the point, telling her that she needed to meet with me to discuss a few important matters. My ex quickly declared that she had been wanting to talk. When asked if her lawyer could be contacted, Sarah claimed she didn't have one but agreed to come the following afternoon to meet. Took everything I had to get through that conversation. The next day, I went to work, desperately trying to keep it together and appear productive. I struggled to keep my lunch down and left at 3 p.m., feeling nauseous as I headed to the firm. I arrived first on purpose, wanting her to walk in and have to sit away from the door, unable to approach me. I was scrolling through pictures of our so-called perfect family when she finally walked in. She needed help walking and was still in 2 casts from the accident. I didn't have to worry about her trying to hug me. Part of me thought she might be playing it up for sympathy, but I reminded myself we had just been in a terrible wreck. I just wanted her to sit down so I could finally ask her to explain herself. Once we were all seated, water was offered, and the meeting commenced. Sophia started by asking Sarah if she was okay with us recording the session. Sarah agreed. As soon as the recording started, my soon-to-be ex-wife attempted to apologize. I cut her off bluntly, point-blank asking her how many men she had cheated on me with and when it had started. There were enough confirmed hookups from the investigator to know that the guy I caught her with was far from the first. Of course, Sarah had no idea what we knew, and I guessed her plan was to minimize the severity of her actions by only admitting to what she thought we already knew. I pressed her again, asking for a rough estimate of how many men she had slept with since David was born. Giving that specific time frame seemed to cause her to pause for a moment, but she continued to act clueless. She still thought it was a game at that point, and I could feel my temper rising. Sophia gently placed her hand on my shoulder and pushed me back from the table. She then asked Sarah if I was a good father. Sarah quickly praised me, saying she couldn't have asked for a better dad for her children. The way she said her children made me want to stand up and flip the table over. Sophia then asked her if the father of her other child would be a good dad, too. As Sarah began to question which other father I was talking about, my lawyer slid the paternity results for Olivia across the table. As much as I hated what my life had become since discovering her infidelity, I needed to witness her reaction in person. She was obviously shocked to find out Olivia wasn't mine and tried to hit me with the "you're the father who has raised her" line, but I had to shut that down. I asked her who Olivia's father was. She looked down, her face hinting at shame, and said she didn't know for sure who he was. That's when Sarah saw me break down into tears for the first time. I just couldn't hold it together any longer and lost it. Sarah was crying too, but she asked if she could explain. She reminded me of the postpartum depression she went through after David was born. I did my best to be sympathetic in that moment. I can say with certainty that I spent every available moment caring for my son, so she could have some time to herself. There were days when she was so depressed that she couldn't even get out of bed, and I took care of everything. But I loved doing it. I loved it for the family I thought I had. I even remembered feeling foolish enough to think that surviving that period had made our relationship stronger. I hoped she wouldn't place the blame on Rebecca. When Sarah first got married, she would go out for girls' nights, and I was relieved, even grateful. They'd been best friends for years but hadn't spent much time together during her pregnancy. Sarah confessed that she got really drunk on one of those nights and let some guy feel her up while she gave him oral sex. She claimed she felt guilty about it for a while. Months, in fact. But then she started to resent not being able to enjoy her youth and freedom to be with whoever she wanted. She revealed that she began hooking up with guys during the nights she would go out with Rebecca. Until the night before the wreck, she had always come home, albeit sometimes late. Over the years, she would insist she didn't want to develop feelings for any of these guys, claiming she always used protection and never slept with the same man more than 3 times. She insisted she just wanted sex. I was left utterly dumbfounded. Discovering that your wife is a filthy liar does that to a person. It felt like realizing your entire life was part of a reality show you never signed up for. I wanted to yell at her, but instead, I was busy calculating how many men she could have possibly cheated on me with over the years. Sophia asked if Sarah had any idea who Olivia's father might be, but Sarah swore she always assumed it was me. My lawyer pointed out that clearly something had happened and suggested maybe a condom had broken. When Sarah confessed that it had happened a few times with different guys, I lost it. I demanded to know who in the hell she was, as I didn't recognize the person telling me these horrifying truths as casually as if she were passing the salt. I asked when she started hating me and why. I wanted to know what I had ever done to deserve this treatment. How could she do this to her daughter? I was furious. Sarah took my rage without defense, knowing it was all true. After everything she had just confessed and what I had shared about how I felt, divorce was inevitable. What had once been a marriage was now a scorched earth, and the only thing left to do was tally up the casualties. I had lost a wife and a daughter. That's 2. A wife lost a husband. That's 3. A daughter lost a father, and a brother lost his sister. Then we had to consider the impact on grandparents and in-laws. Sarah had essentially destroyed 2 entire families. Her parents would never accept what she had done, and I swore by everything sacred that I would show them all the evidence the PI uncovered. She admitted to meeting men from dating apps while out with Rebecca, using those girl nights as opportunities to hook up. She claimed she never intended to hurt me and insisted she had no idea Olivia wasn't mine. I genuinely believed her on that point, as I had no idea either, but DNA doesn't lie. I asked her why she didn't just divorce me. Without hesitation, she said it was because she didn't want to lose the security I provided. She cried as she spoke, but I could only look at her with scorn. I felt disgusted by the person sitting across from me. I felt used, humiliated, emasculated. I felt defeated. I was pretty sure one of the reasons she came to talk without a lawyer was that I owned everything. She didn't have much to lose besides a small and my assets, which I had entered the marriage with after inheriting my grandfather's estate when I was 14. The woman I called Mom isn't my biological mother. My real mother passed away when I was 2 from a rare, fast-spreading cancer. My dad remarried the woman I've always called Mom when I was 4. I've known my entire life that she wasn't my biological mother and that I wasn't her biological son. Later, I learned she couldn't have children, and raising me helped her experience that. When my biological mother's father died, everything he left behind went to me as her heir, but I couldn't access it until I turned 21. I studied hard and went to school, but I never had to work. She knows I will wipe the floor with her in the divorce, and she won't get anywhere close to half. Sure, she has a job. She can't work at the moment due to her injuries, but she does have a job. Part of me wants to punish her, while the other part just wants to be done with her. Sarah was obviously medicated for pain. Maybe that's why she was so blunt. But her words cut me deeply as my imagination made things even worse. I asked her if she felt any shame. She claimed she did. I asked how in the hell we were supposed to find out who Olivia's father actually was. My soon-to-be ex-wife started spouting some nonsense about, I already know who the father is. I wasn't in the mood for a philosophical discussion about what makes a father. Whoever Olivia's father is deserves to know, and she needs to be aware of his family for health reasons. The evidence the PI gathered didn't go back to before Olivia was born. I asked her if she could find any of these men or if she had saved their numbers. She had the audacity to say that the whole point of losing their numbers was to ensure she never saw them again. My God, how did I not grasp that logic? I told her she might have wanted to keep a number to inform him that he had a child on the way, or that she might have contracted an STD. I want my name removed from Olivia's birth certificate. DNA proves she is her mother's child, not mine. As I stated before, I will support her financially out of my own free will long after she turns 18. She will want for nothing. When it comes to my son and custody, I honestly don't know what to do. Before the paternity test results, I had been leaning toward a 90-10 arrangement, allowing my ex-wife custody one weekend a month and certain holidays. Now that Olivia isn't mine, I feel uneasy about pursuing custody for her, even if I could secure it. Since David is indeed her brother, I'll end up with half. I don't want to take him away from her either. I want to spare both of them from suffering, but I haven't seen Olivia since the test results, and I can't let her witness me breaking down because of all this. God knows how much her therapy is going to cost me, but I will have to pay for it. There's no telling if her real dad will be able to afford it. My own therapy bills will probably be enough to fund some therapist's new beach house. Driving home after the meeting, a huge part of me wanted to end it all. It felt like the hardest yet most beneficial solution for everyone except me. Both families could continue pretending about paternity. My ex could live her life openly while spending my grandfather's money, and the kids wouldn't have to deal with any broken marriage or failed relationships. But by the time I got home, I thought, phew, that Sophia is drafting divorce papers and legal documents to declare me as not Olivia's father. It will take much longer, but I don't want any legal obligation that forces me to interact with or financially support offspring that aren't mine. The legal team is researching ways to uncover who Olivia's real father is. Many ancestry sites can suggest potential relatives when results come back. Right now, that's our first plan of action. Even if the results don't lead to a specific individual, they might point to a brother, cousin, or other relative. Whoever this guy is may not be ready to accept a child he didn't know about. Could cause anxiety in his life, but I doubt he'll feel nearly the terror I felt losing my daughter forever because she never existed. Everything is so messed up right now. Nothing feels stable. Chaos is a constant burden at this point. The kids come back to the house on Sunday afternoon. I've never wanted to avoid seeing them before, but I know there will be many unavoidable moments that I won't be prepared for. When Olivia sees me and wants to hug her daddy, I'm not even sure how I'll react. Do I hug her and cry like a baby, knowing she has never truly been mine? Or do I tell her I'm not the person she thinks I am? I don't have it in me to be cruel to her, but my heart is shattered. There's no one to take this pain out on, not even Sarah, because nothing I could do outside of murder could equal the betrayal she has inflicted upon me. That scale will never balance. She used me and spat me out. She deserves to rot in hell for her promiscuous, deceitful ways. I'm utterly destroyed, and everything I once loved is too. I will win the divorce. Sophia and her team will ensure it's the most lopsided division of assets in divorce history. But Sarah has diminished or eliminated the value of so much for me that it feels like she has already won again. To hell with her. I'm left with a son she will try to use against me and manipulate. Some people are truly so horrible that they deserve to be put down like an animal. I made the foolish decision to have a child with one of them. Now I realize I'm not the only one who has made a foolish choice. I'm receiving flack about my role in Olivia's life going forward and how I should treat her. Everyone seems to have an opinion. The truth is, it will be impossible to do what's best for me and what's best for the kids. Just as this has damaged me beyond repair, it will also harm the kids. Yet I have people accusing me of wanting to hurt Olivia just to get back at Sarah. Someone even told me that I'm a misogynist, claiming that if my son hadn't been mine, I would have just accepted it. To that, I say that's completely untrue and even more incorrect. People are suggesting I shouldn't tell Olivia now, and I can see the reasoning behind that. But if we manage to find Olivia's father, who will they say that guy is? I could let her go on believing I'm her dad for the rest of her life, but that's a lie that could cause her even more pain down the road. Everyone has their opinions, but they aren't living my life. They aren't dealing with this betrayal. I have to make decisions based on what I believe is best for me and the kids, even if it means others will judge me for it. But there's a guy out there who has a child and doesn't even know it. Sure, he might want nothing to do with her life, but if he does, he should be part of her formative years. He deserves to know her, and she deserves to know him and his family. He could be the nicest guy in the world, a truly great dad. Everyone wants what's best for Olivia, but opinions on what that truly means vary widely because nobody knows how this situation will play out, and no one can see the future. I want my name removed from her birth certificate for legal reasons, but people think I'm cold and heartless for that. She isn't my daughter. That's a scientific fact that can't be disputed. It doesn't matter how Olivia feels about me or how I feel about her. Feelings change every day, which is why we rely on science. I wish to God the science was wrong. I can feel I impregnated Sarah twice. But no, I was just first in line. Science took my beliefs and shattered them into 1,000 pieces. I don't like it, but facts are facts. When I see Olivia again on Sunday, I know I'm going to lose it. I can keep my composure around Sarah, but I won't be able to do that with Olivia. I'm going to cry. She's going to wonder why I'm crying, and I can't tell her. That would only make her feel worse. David will wonder the same thing, and I won't be able to tell him either. So there I'll be, trying to be a responsible adult and parent, with 2 kids crying for no apparent reason. People are worried about how I'll treat Olivia. The truth is, I don't know how I'll respond until that moment arrives. All I know is that I'm not going into that reunion with hatred for Olivia or wishing any harm on her beautiful little head. But the emotions may overwhelm me. I might find myself imagining the countless men Sarah cheated with. It might render me catatonic. Those who think I'm going to see her again and show her cruelty are just delusional. The go-between from the law firm texted me at 3 p.m. Sunday to let me know she had the kids safely in the car with their belongings and was on her way to the house. I doubt any text in history has been more dreaded than that one was for me. What made it all the more tragic was that just weeks before, I would have been smiling and eagerly awaiting that text. Now, a reunion I once yearned for felt like something I dreaded. I had no plans to bring up divorce, paternity, or any issues regarding the kids. As much as I tried to prepare myself, I knew I wasn't in the right state of mind to tackle any of that. My goal was to make things feel as normal as possible, like the other times they stayed with their grandparents while Sarah and I were on vacation. That's what I wanted. But I knew reality would be completely different, and I had little control over it. Jessica, the intern from the firm, pulled into the driveway. I watched them arrive from the front bay window. I walked outside and down the steps as the car came to a stop. I smiled as I approached the passenger side of Jessica's car. The moment I saw Olivia in her car seat, beaming a huge smile at me, I started crying. Oh, I was still smiling. You couldn't have knocked that damn smile off me with a 2x4. I just hoped that if I maintained my smile, it might convince the kids and myself that everything was okay. I wish I'd had a plan B. As soon as I managed to get her out of the car seat, David rushed to my side, and I hugged both him and Olivia tightly. I told them I missed them. That was really all I could manage to say as I kept crying. People can hate me all they want. God knows I've received my fair share of hate-filled messages, both privately and publicly. But it felt different now. It didn't feel the same as the day I hugged my children goodbye. I wish I could say it did, just to appease those who think I'm a loathsome wretch. Maybe part of the loss I felt stemmed from the destruction of the family unit we all used to know. My heart was just completely shattered. Seeing them and knowing she isn't mine broke my heart all over again. That's what my life has become. Every single damn day feels like a new heartbreak. I learn more about the depths of Sarah's cheating escapades. I uncover pain I can't shield the kids from. I'm reminded of past bonds and know they were all built on lies. I keep trying to step back from the epicenter of chaos that began when I caught Sarah cheating, but I keep getting slammed with stray boulders of betrayal every day, learning just how deeply I've been deceived. Jessica was a saint for helping me get the kids into the house. I loaded up all their belongings like a pack mule while she closed the doors and trunk. As soon as I placed their bags down on the floor, I turned to see Olivia looking up at me. She didn't say a word. She just gazed up at me with those eyes that seemed to know I needed a hug. I squatted down, and she walked right into my arms, wrapping her little arms around me as tightly as she could. That child broke me. I wanted to be strong, but no child should ever have to hear a parent cry like that. Everyone keeps insisting I do what damages them the least. That's logical, sure. But what if everything I do ends up causing damage? What if there's no way to protect them from the fallout? Letting her see a source of strength and security crumble has to be hurting her. How could it not? If I abandoned her, it would destroy her. But by staying in her life, I'm hurting her too. A 6-year-old shouldn't have to console a grown man, especially not for something that wasn't her fault. In that moment, my soul was seething with rage towards Sarah. Yet the little girl she deceived me into believing was mine was just showing me love the only way she knew how, hugging me tight. The undeniable truth I came to realize in that instant was that both she and I are victims in this mess. As the adult, it's my job to navigate this nightmare and protect her as much as I can. I'm supposed to be the one who can maintain composure and handle this better. She doesn't even realize she's been victimized yet. It's as if we are the only survivors of a plane crash. We made it, but it's going to leave scars on our souls. As survivors, we need to stick together. We need to support one another because we're going through the same damn thing. Yes, our perspectives are vastly different, but in that moment, I was feeling the loss while trying to spare her from the pain by shouldering it myself. I've been viewing this as Sarah taking my daughter from me, but it's equally true that Sarah took her father from her. The villain in this story is Sarah. I'm done feeling guilty for what I feel. There's no paternity handbook I know of. What's the proper way to react when you find out the daughter you've raised isn't really yours? Get the hell out of here with that nonsense. Nobody can tell me how I should feel or how I should react. The only analogy I can think of is children switched at birth. That's a couple facing a similar situation together. They were both deceived and find out that the child they thought was their own is actually the offspring of another couple. Unless you've experienced that or what I'm going through right now, you can't possibly understand how it feels. After about half an hour, I finally managed to pull myself together. Jessica left after sharing hugs with all three of us. I handed her a small envelope containing $500, telling her it was for gas. I knew she drove an electric vehicle, and she knew it wasn't for gas. I carried Olivia around in my arms while David showed me some of the things he had made with his grandfather. Olivia kept her arms wrapped around my neck, making sure I knew she had helped stain some of the wood. I fell into my usual "I don't believe you" game. David joined in, and it quickly devolved into a tickle session, first for Olivia and then for David. I can't express how wonderful and simultaneously heartbreaking it was to hear Olivia's laughter and squeals of joy. Seeing David happy and laughing brought joy to my broken soul, even though I knew the future would likely hold little of what we were enjoying in that moment. They teamed up to wrestle with me, and I liked watching them work together, even if it was against me. Father or not, by the time she's old enough to date, I'll make sure she knows how to say no with conviction. I put on some music. Olivia has loved music since she was a baby. I've danced with her from the first week she was born up until last month. I'm sure I look goofy, but I don't care. I have fun, and she loves acting as silly as I do. I ordered takeout for dinner from Uber Eats. We're not Asian, but we sure ate like it. David can put away some lo mein for a 10-year-old, and for whatever reason, Olivia loves crab rangoon. I didn't eat much. My appetite has already taken care of any weight loss concerns I had. I simply enjoyed having dinner with them again. Since they both had school the next day, I got them bathed, dressed in pajamas, and ready for bed. David likes to read a book to settle down. I gave him a hug, told him I loved him, and said I'd see him in the morning. I got Olivia tucked into bed and read her a storybook, pointing out details in the illustrations. I had her nearly nodding off when I felt tears welling up. I kissed her on the forehead and told her, "I love you." For the first time since I found out the truth. Call me the biggest jerk on the planet. I don't care, but saying it felt like finally admitting the truth. Everything in my life has been a struggle lately to determine what is real and what isn't. My love for Olivia is real. I love her. Right or wrong, I do feel different, but I love her. I went from not wanting to take anything away from her to wanting to give her everything. It's a significant shift. I found myself waiting for Olivia to tell me she loved me. I know she does, even if she doesn't say it. Instead, she took the moment to tell me, "Mommy loves you." I heard her loud and clear. I made a point not to snap at her and tried to be as gentle as possible when I asked, "Olivia, why did you say that?" She replied, "Mommy told." I sweetly asked, "Did Mommy just say that? Or did she tell you to tell me that? It seemed my soon-to-be ex-wife had to explain why I hadn't visited and wouldn't be coming over, and that she wouldn't be returning home with them. She even told the kids that her parents' house was her new home, which I was somewhat relieved about. But the "I love yous" I still needed to get to the bottom of. I pressed for more details, but then David walked into the room. He revealed that their mom had told him she wouldn't be coming home because I didn't love her anymore. What the hell was I supposed to say to that? Yep, it's all on me. I just fell out of love with your mom. Blame me was definitely not happening. I called our usual babysitter and asked if she could come over for a few hours to look after the kids. Since they were already in bed, she could study while getting paid. She agreed. I got into my car and headed straight for my in-laws' house. I didn't bother calling ahead. When I arrived, I knocked on the front door and asked to see Sarah. Her mom led me to her childhood room, where she was recuperating from her injuries. I turned to her mom and placed my hand on the doorknob, telling her that Sarah and I needed to have a conversation. She sensed I was a little on edge, so she hurried out of the way. As soon as the door closed, I asked her who the hell she thought she was trying to pin our split on the fact that I could never love her again. She insisted it was the truth. I told her that perhaps that was true, but the reason I could never love her again was because she is lying, deceitful, worthless, and promiscuous. She was trying to shift blame onto me for her role in everything. She claimed she had already tried to apologize, but I didn't want to hear it. I exploded. I asked her what good a damn apology was going to do. It wouldn't undo the damage, nor would it prevent more harm from occurring. And despite everything, I didn't believe she was genuinely sorry for what she'd done. I demanded to know how she could manipulate two innocent children to make me look like the villain. If she had any guilt, I asked her at what point I became the bad guy in our marriage. Without missing a beat, she said, "When you didn't give me a second chance." Not gonna lie, I stopped her and asked how much pain medication she was on and if she was mixing it with alcohol. That was the only logical explanation I could find for her thinking that a worthless liar deserves a second chance, mercy, or dignity. Nope, she lost all that by her own actions. I couldn't even recognize my wife anymore. It was as if she had been possessed by the ghost of Caligula or Charlie Sheen. My beautiful, virtuous wife had been replaced by a soulless hookup artist. And it's a miracle my junk hasn't rotted off due to her disgusting actions. I asked her if she felt justified in destroying everything in her life for sex. She insisted it wasn't just about sex. I reminded her that she claimed she wanted no emotional involvement. She said that much of it, especially at first, was about validation. She liked being chased. She got annoyed when I asked how she could even consider herself chaste. But I told her she could go get bent. Actions affect how you are perceived for the rest of your life, and she needed to deal with that. Sarah and I ended up talking for several hours. When she went through the depression after having David, she even told me I had been the most supportive husband she could have asked for. So I had to ask her why she betrayed me so cruelly. She explained that despite such a joyful event in her life, there was a part of her so riddled with anxiety that she felt like she wanted to die. She said she loved me and loved David, but for reasons she couldn't quite grasp, she felt depressed and dead inside. She ended up taking an additional 6 months off work because of her issues. I got her the best therapists and doctors money could buy. She admitted this, saying that even that started making her feel guilty for letting me down. She felt like I was carrying the weight of our family. She told me she felt overwhelmed even though she knew she wasn't shouldering any of the burden. She started to doubt whether she should have ever become a mother, despite always wanting to be one. She withdrew from friends both in person and through text. Every day, she would tell me she loved me and apologized. I told her she had nothing to apologize for. I just wanted her to get better. Perhaps she was apologizing for what she was about to do. When Rebecca showed up at our house unannounced that first day, I was relieved to see her. I knew Becca was bold enough not to be pushed away but kind enough to help Sarah open up. Still, it took months before we had what could be considered a night out. Just getting Sarah to go to Starbucks was a victory back then. There are plenty of guys who think I'm the biggest fool on earth for letting my wife go to bars or clubs with a single girlfriend. In 99% of situations, they would be completely right, and I should have put a stop to it much sooner. But at that point in our lives, after all the sadness and isolation, Getting her out and about seemed to lift her spirits even after just the first outing. She tried to explain that she had suddenly become a wife and mother in the span of 2 years. She said that seeing how eager men were for her, even if it was just for sex, boosted her ego. She claimed that the first incident wouldn't have happened if she hadn't been so drunk. But it happened willingly. Once she crossed that line, she knew I would never touch her again if I found out. She realized she'd lose everything because she came into the marriage with nothing. I asked her if she ever thought I would discover her infidelity and how I would react if I did. She admitted she knew it would destroy me. She claimed to feel horrible about it. I had to ask the obvious question: why continue to cheat? She said that as soon as she sobered up after the first time, she felt guilt, shame, and regret. I remembered her being really sad for a week after her first night out. Rebecca came over, and the two of them talked for hours alone. From that point on, I got the old Sarah back for several months. She revealed that she had told Becca that day she felt unworthy of me because of what she had done. She knew that if I ever found out, our marriage would be over. She claimed she decided to take it to the grave and try to be the best wife possible to make it up to me. Red flag, I know. Call me a fool if you want, but we had a baby to care for, and I had been doing 95% of the nighttime caregiving. I got my wife back. At that time, I would have thought it was madness to consider that a red flag. Felt like a miracle then. Within 2 weeks, I was back to working part-time, then full-time once Sarah adjusted to being a stay-at-home mom. Looking back, the time just before and after David turned 1 was some of the happiest of our lives, at least for me. Discovering it was all rooted in her efforts to atone for her infidelity with a stranger forever altered those happy memories. I asked her why she cheated again if I just wasn't good enough for her. I had always believed we had a great sex life. Aside from her period of depression, she always acted as if she enjoyed being intimate with me. She claimed that the longer she kept the secret, the worse she felt about herself. But unlike before David was born, she couldn't show me how she felt. She knew I'd want to know why she was sad and would try to comfort her, but she couldn't bring herself to tell me. She said the internal struggle of keeping the secret while maintaining the facade of happiness was tearing her apart. She reminded me of the reunion with my biological mother's family out of state. I took David with me to introduce him to her family for the first time. Sarah canceled at the last minute, claiming she was sick. I couldn't have stopped her from cheating on me at that moment. That was already in the past. But maybe I could have prevented her from heading down a road that would deceive me for 6 years, making me believe in something I cherished that was never mine. I wasn't blaming myself. She should have been on that plane. No, she should have confessed her infidelity and let me move on with my life. Yet somehow, multiple mistakes entangled with numerous lies, all with little regard for the consequences, have become my burden to bear. That's something you do to an enemy, not someone you claim to have ever loved. She spun some tale about being so depressed that weekend while I was away. She knew she was unworthy, even if I didn't. She was punishing herself, even if I was oblivious to her supposed guilt. That was how she rationalized it. She understood that if I found out, I would feel disgusted by her. I never stopped showing my love or telling her how much I cared. But at some point, she realized that if I knew the truth, I wouldn't love her anymore. The attention I focused on her didn't matter. It didn't carry the same weight because she recognized her own unworthiness. If I learned about her sleazy encounters, I'd see that too. She admitted she called Becca for a shoulder to cry on, and Becca convinced her to go out for drinks. According to Sarah, she spent the first part of the night crying and asking what she should do. The bartender bought her a few shots to help her cheer up. She didn't have to say that Rebecca nudged her toward some flirting. Before she knew it, she was kissing a guy in the back alley behind the bar, but caught herself before things went further. She returned inside feeling even worse, realizing she had cheated again. More alcohol followed. Rebecca needed someone to help Sarah inside, so she asked the very guy who had just had his tongue down my wife's throat. Rebecca left them alone, and clothes came off. I asked her if she ever thought of David, if I ever crossed her mind while she betrayed us both. She got defensive and told me she never betrayed her son. I made it clear that she betrayed not only me and David but also Olivia, our families, everyone who witnessed our vows and God above. She shattered the sanctity of our family and marriage. But I stopped myself, shaking my head, telling her that despite everything she had done, she should have just let me go. I told her I would have looked after David. She could have slept around with the entire state after our divorce. I would have gladly written her name on bathroom stalls for everyone to see. But she didn't. She kept lying and cheating. So much of what I heard disgusted me, as if she had an actual strategy. After the first few guys, she didn't want them to get attached, knowing she wasn't going anywhere unless she absolutely had to. She wasn't seeking an emotional connection. She called it fishing. She would get a guy's number, break the ice, give a little nibble, then pull away, making him pursue her on her terms. When she said she already knew she was beautiful, seeking second opinions didn't feel like a bad thing at the time. I just looked at her, shaking my head in disbelief. At any rate, the bartender is not Olivia's father. That much we are sure of. He was months too early in the timeline to be the sperm donor, and she claims they only hooked up that one time. I asked if she could remember the names of the specific guys she had been talking to and who had pursued her. She might recall a couple of first names, but she wouldn't know how to find them, which was enough to shut that conversation down for the night. Sure, I wanted more answers, but the details of this mess weren't going to come out in one night, and that wasn't why I was there. She was seated in a chair to prop her cast up on pillows. I got down close to her face and told her she was a pitiful excuse for a human being, and I genuinely believe she has no soul. I told her that her actions have caused unimaginable pain, and that they would continue to do so in the future. But I looked her squarely in the eyes and made it clear that I would not allow her to hurt my children anymore. I told her outright that I was the one who had been deceived for 6 years. If anyone deserved a little leeway for focusing on his needs, it was me. But Sarah, I meant every word. Petty manipulation and nonsense were only going to make me despise her even more. There was no way we were getting back together. I felt disgusted that she even thought she could touch me. Loyalty wasn't even in her vocabulary. But whether she liked it or not, I was going to be loyal to Olivia. I was determined to protect her as much as I could. And if that meant shielding her from her mother's lies and deceit, so be it. I warned her that Sophia had friends who would love to help get her declared an unfit mother in exchange for a new BMW. I went there. It was a threat, and I meant every single word. I told her that if she had things to say, she could say them to my face. Getting David or Olivia to relay her messages would never happen again. Olivia was to know as little as possible about our divorce and, for now, about paternity. But when the time came to break the news to her, I would be the one to do it. It would be my responsibility to explain how her mother victimized us both. But we survived together. There was no way in hell I was going to allow the person who destroyed so much for us to downplay it or pin the blame on me. That awful truth wasn't coming anytime soon, at least not until I decided it was necessary. I pointed out that she didn't have a lawyer and informed her that the kids would be staying with me for at least the next 2 weeks. She needed some time to reflect on the entirety of her betrayal and the cruel manipulation that would only hurt Olivia. I'd let her know when she had earned the right to be a mother again. There wasn't much she could do. I had the kids and she was in 2 castes. Let her deal with her loneliness. My God, I've made mistakes in my life. On the drive home, I kept wishing I could have somehow known how everything would turn out. This is the biggest struggle I've ever faced, and I hope it remains the biggest one. But so much has been destroyed. The sham of a marriage I was living needs to be torn down, ground into dust, and salted. There's no reason to hurt a little girl who is blissfully unaware of the battle between her mother and her daddy. I want to keep it that way. Those kids cannot see us together. When Sarah and I are in the same room, the entire atmosphere radiates venom. It's beyond toxic for us. I won't subject the little ones to any of that. I will not fight her in front of them, but I swear I will put her in her place and call out any BS she tries to pull. It feels like every decision I make has 1,000 repercussions. The man up, DNA doesn't matter crowd needs to understand that hurting Olivia is the last thing I want to do. I intend to be in her corner and fight for her. I don't know how this mess is going to end, but both she and I got shafted by the same person. I refuse to let that person damage her the way she damaged me. Not happening. And no one is coming around my daughter until I decide otherwise. That decision won't be up to Sarah either. If I check his background and meet him, I'll make that call when the time comes. Until then, my son David, my daughter Olivia, and I are weathering a storm. I've managed to shield them from what's coming. I'll protect them from as much of the fallout as I can. But our souls are all going to bleed at some point before this is over. This carnage could have been avoided, but once the bomb goes off, there's no escaping it. I'm in therapy twice a week. I'm not sure it's helping yet, but it's still early in the sessions, so I'll give it a few more tries. Right now, I need to focus on my healing and make this transition in life as smooth as possible for the kids.